Welcome back to our next episode of As the Rabbit Descends Down the Hole. In this episode about Moses, we're going to go and we're going to discuss something that I think gets overlooked a lot when it comes to the interactions he has with Pharaoh, because there's something to that. And as well as with the plagues, the 10 plagues that happen. And I think there's something that gets overlooked with that too. So, and you might wonder, well, I thought you were just going to stick to the practical things. I think this is very, very important and very key to learn about what's going forward about all this. So, Moses goes to Pharaoh, as you know, and let people go. No, I'm not going to. His heart hurt. Blah blah blah. I mean, why is Pharaoh going to do this? I mean, who are you? And you're going to tell me to let these people go that are building my pyramids? No, that's not going to happen, right? You got to be kidding me, right? But there's an incident where where he drops the staff and the staff turns into the snake, and the Pharaoh has his priests do the same thing. But there's something that Pharaoh says that's very interesting. He calls it a magic trick, and that's very interesting because the priests are what's controlling the people and controlling the whole thing. And yet he's giving it behind the scenes and telling you, well, we're just doing sleight of hand, right? He's manipulating the system. That's what he's doing. And it's very interesting. He kind of gives it up. Because think about it, the priesthood has always been, there's always a level of corruption when it comes to that in-between between you and God. There's always a level of corruption. And there has been, for forever. I mean, one of Jesus' main points of coming here on the cross and everything was to eliminate the priesthood. You don't need that. It's just between you and God, And, he becomes the intermediary at that point. So, tearing down that entire system. And with that, something that you have to understand is that when you do that, when you attack that party, I mean, think about it. This really upset Pharaoh, much the way Jesus upset the Pharisees of his time too, and pretty much every time you attacked the priesthood. In fact, there's interesting stories, later on, if you read church history, how they would, have to buy these tributes and things like that, forgiveness of sin, and it's how the church got money, and, can I give payment for future sins, Well, anyway, this guy, he tricks, he basically corners the priesthood on this, and he says, well, I want to pay for a future sin, right? And okay, give it up, right? And he pays, I don't know, whatever it is, 10 shekels or whatever it was at the time. And the guy goes and robs the king, right? This actually happened. It's in church history. It's really kind of fun. So then, and the king goes, well, wait a minute, you can't do this. But see, the king's making money off the priest. It's all kind of colluding together here. And he goes, well, wait a minute. I bought future sin. I bought a pass. So you can't, what are you going to do? So the king is now in a bind, because if he says, well, you can't pay for future sin, he just lost income, and it shows that there's cracks in the system, right? But if he lets him go, he looks like, well, wait a minute, everybody's going to do this to me. So it's a dilemma. It creates a dilemma. I believe in a story that they let him go, but they kind of follow him, type of thing. And he tries to do it again, but they don't let him. But, there's always a level of corruption with the priesthood. They'll take a little bit of scripture and they'll kind of bend it and things like this. That happens today in churches. Mark 11 gets just destroyed. I mean, it's not used to get a car. He's talking about prayer. The Temple Mount. That's the mountain that he's talking about, and it just irritates me. I mean, think about it. Jesus goes. I know that we're getting off topic here, but Jesus goes. They're going to the temple. He curses his fig tree for not having the fruit, and it's like, wow, that's kind of strong, right? And it wasn't in season, or it was like, this is the thing. It wasn't even attempting to blossom. And then he goes in there, and he has a sea incident where he turns over tables, do all this other stuff. I mean, it's just this massive scene. And then they're leaving, he curses the fig tree, and things of this nature, and they look back, and he says, whoever says to this mountain, be thou removed, be cast to the sea. And it's like, people take that, and they'll, well, that's how, you can use that, because speaking to your mountain, and speak to the mountain, and the mountain will be removed, and that's how you get a car or a house or whatever. And it's like, wait a minute. So now he's giving a motivational speech, It doesn't even make sense. He's standing at the base of the Temple Mount, and he said, to this mountain, be thou removed. How is it all of a sudden some I don't know. It doesn't fit in context. Right? All of a sudden now he's going to give a motivational speech after he just did what he did. He just exposed everything. Come on. Anyway, let's get back to our storyline. So, the plagues. Now, the plagues are very interesting because they follow a specific order. The Nile turns to blood. Now, was it like actual blood, like, you prick your finger blood? Because that would be really gross. I mean, it's possible, but, because it does say blood, but there have been instances of water turning red, and it's from iron oxidation and methane is being released underneath, and it turns it red, and it creates this really toxic smell to it, and we'll get to that in a second. But you see what God is doing here. See, God, there's a supernatural to what God is doing, but it follows a natural progression. The two go hand in hand. So this happens. The water, all of a sudden, there's this iron oxidation and methane, and it turns it red. Well, when you do that, the chain reaction, now you have frogs going everywhere because frogs come out of the water. The fish are dying, so the gnats and flies. The sanitation gets really bad. I mean, it's just, which leads to the livestock falling because of the fact that, well, the water's no good, right? And with that, now you've got like boils, this airborne irritant is in the air because of these gases. But then you have a big event happen. And they actually do know that this happened right around this time frame. They have been able to date it back, there was a volcano that went off not too far from here. So you have volcanic ash, right, that went up. And in doing that, see, now you have the darkness, right? And well, the locust came, right? So hell from the volcano, goes up. Locusts are coming in, because of all the livestock that's being destroyed. And because of that, so it's all kind of following this whole little pattern here. Darkness sets in, right? And then what happens with Passover? The angel of death passes over. It passes by the people that have blood on the door. That's the supernatural part. So, the volcano was Thera, I believe. Thera, I believe. Anyway, and it was by Greece. It was in that time area. They're piecing that all together. In any case, so what I'm getting to is, so the angel of death is how they word it. You have this toxic fume, and it's on the. Remember, it says all your firstborn will die. Well, the custom in Egypt was that the firstborn laid at the feet of the lower part of the house on the floor, right? So they're the most vulnerable. They were on the floor. It's almost like the more higher up you were, the more status you had in the house. So the firstborn was there. All these kids, essentially, they were there. They were all killed because these toxic fumes, this methane gas. And there's actually incidents of this happening. I believe it was in Africa. A few years back, you can look it up, where a similar thing happened. See, the supernatural part of that is the blood on the door. That's the supernatural part of that, more than anything else. It's this natural system and this natural progression that God initiated, and it kind of carried this thing through, but that protection of the blood on the door. And it did happen to them, and he also had them be ready to leave. So they weren't necessarily falling asleep on the floor. They were in a state of being ready to leave. The unleavened bread, which is basically pita bread, or something to that effect. So they were. There's this element that I think that it's so that people don't really grasp onto, that it's just so mystical and out there, and that's why it's just a fable, but it's really not, because these are natural systems that God initiated, God saw through. Moses knew that it would follow this progression, whether God told him or he just understood, if he did this what happened, this what happened, cause and effect. Perhaps he pieced that together when he was wording them, and then the supernatural protected them, had them ready to go, and they left. Give them all your silver and gold, and they went out, as I said. But silver, they feel good at the moment. Yeah, look at all the money we got, and they get to the wilderness, and you can't do nothing with it. So. I hope that was interesting to you. I thought it was interesting. When I first learned about this and how this all comes together. So I hope to see you in the next one. I'll see you soon.